all of the content that we're going to do today is for entertainment purposes only. We're trying to raise awareness of what actually goes on in the real world. We're not saying these are good things to do. We're not saying that these are bad things to do. They're just things that happen, and I'm giving you the benefit of my 20 years of experience within the industry, and I'm going to discuss some of the things that I have personally done or that athletes I work with have chosen to do. I'm joined by Jay Diminishing.
Do we condone clients, people taking steroids in jiu-jitsu and grappling?
I don't give a fuck, you can do what you want, but if you compete in a tested federation knowingly using drugs, you are a scumbag.
So my kind of question to you then is, if the testing procedures are so low level, such as like UFC talk about like TRT replacement therapy versus TRT Sport Plus and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what I said was also a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I've competed in a tested federation.
Yes. And medals.
And medals.
At a major.
It's a valid argument. Like, everybody is doing it. Everybody at that high level is using, if they're not using steroids, using performance-enhancing compounds in some way, shape or form. Is that ethically incorrect? I think only you can make that decision. But you're the one that's actually coaching athletes. I speak to people in a consultation. So someone comes to me and says, I have this problem. What is the tool I can use to solve that issue? So I don't get so bogged down in the ethics of it. As a coach, where do you sell it?
It depends, obviously, because we were talking about, there's fucking nutritionists, so like, it depends with everything, right?
No, I completely, look, if you ask a question and someone answers with, it depends, they're probably smart enough to recognise that things are not as simple as people like to make out.
Compliment. Obviously, when we look at the availability in terms of competitions out there at a high level, CGI, ADCC, AJP, all these other federations that are out there, they don't test. So it depends like where your preference is. I obviously after recent trips have a big improved understanding of the competition level at IBJJF events and a better respect for that level based on the stigma that can sometimes be around it in terms of the costing, the point system and stuff like this. And obviously, as we saw, obviously with some of the competition going on, it's much more harder to be successful, especially at the majors. So again, the testing procedure at IBJJF events is only for black belt adults at majors, I believe. I don't know if it's the same for opens, but even then, the testing protocol isn't that robust and it's a random pick. So I don't know if that's kind of the setup of the testing procedure is very open and vague that kind of says what's their kind of stance of it. Do you know what I mean? It's not like UFC where it's like, we're going to test you on a random fucking day and you're not going to know about it and you're going to tell us about it. So if I'm in a position where I want my athlete to have all the chips in their corner, even if there's a few loose chips which are a little bit of a grey area, I would say lift up to try and utilize it if possible. However, it always comes back to this point of you need a performance to enhance in the first place to use the drugs, right? There's no point in trying to enhance no performance. You're just basically become marginally better than average, right? Depending on that.
I would take marginally better than average.
Yeah,
I would take that, absolutely. Marginally better average would be dramatically improved from where I'm at. Guys like Gordon Ryan, fairly openly known that they use.
Since he's come away from IBJJF. So it's like, okay, he's now catering for the Saloni shows, the ADCCs, all that type of jazz.
But he was clearly using before.
Yeah, but that comes back to the rigidness of the testing procedure, right? And that's where it's like, okay, where do we draw the line with this? Because it doesn't seem robust enough for it to be, okay, fair game across the board. Then you've also got the bias of it being like, oh, well, what country are they from type of thing? Are they Brazilian? Are they somewhere else type of thing? Where there has been multiple scenarios. I think a common one that's just come recently of a guy in a full rear naked choke, belly down on top of it. I saw that rolling out and then just be given a vantage point. And I'm saying, right, we don't know the full context. The ref could have been that it's like 100th match of the day, didn't think clearly, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But it needs to be a staple across the board. And until that's set at the high standards, I think it's fair to say that it has too many loopholes in it that it can't be abused. So I think if it's a major issue, they need to address it across the board.
Sure. So leading on from that, within bodybuilding and powerlifting, it's kind of accepted that you need to, you do skill acquisition before you do drugs. You need to learn to train. You need to learn how to do things. Yeah. When is the right time for a combat athlete specifically? Because skill acquisition is a much bigger phase for this than it is for something like bodybuilding. However, improving your ability to spend more time on the mats, improving your recovery, also increases the amount of time you can spend under the curve acquiring skill.
So I'd say an interesting person to look at would be Scott with some of the clients he's working with. They've got themselves to a good level of performance, and then it's then the case of some of them have been enhanced before, some haven't, and it's then say, okay, fine, how much more further can we push them? We could probably categorically say these athletes are we're the top 5% of the jiu-jitsu world, if not even higher again. So it's that argument of like, how far do you push yourself natural in bodybuilding to say, hey, I'm going to now go enhanced? Because take Bob, for example, Bob Waterhouse, where who competed in a natural state at a non-tested bodybuilding show and still got his pro card.
That's it. Badger got all the way to UK Strongest Man, completely natural in untested federations. And then when he progressed to using, he immediately got to the world stage. Whereas a lot of guys will use to get to the UKs, and then we talked before about runway. They then haven't got a lot of levers left to pull, other than just more.
Which is another point I wanted to add in. Again, it's something that came out of the bodybuilding, which the jiu-jitsu world need to understand. You want to try and get as much as you can out of the enhancement of what you're taking before just simply taking more. I think
with jiu-jitsu, it operates on a bell curve. So beyond a certain dose, your cardiovascular performance will suffer to such degree that more drugs are not beneficial.
And we've had that as well, where we've, again, some other clients that we're aware of who came to a point of being much more muscular, more heavier, and found a regression in their progress, and even said, actually, I'm not comfortable with doing this. I think obviously curiosity kills the cat with everyone. They go, I want to be bigger, I want to be more jacked, is it going to be beneficial, I'm going to be super strong? But there is, like a performance car on the road versus a performance car on the track, it's then saying, right, where is that sweet spot for it? You can't be too heavy, you can't be too light, you want to be performing at the right rev range, all that type of jazz. But my point being with the usage side of things is that you want to try and get as much as you can bang to your butt before jumping in on the heavy stuff. I think I remember one guy in particular, again from bodybuilding, saying that some people are starting on some super heavy compounds immediately, and the dosing is ridiculously high, and it's all of a sudden, well, you're going to have to go higher than that initial dosage straight away. And it's, again, keeping that same mindset of getting a performance and then enhancing it again, and keeping that same sort of rhythm of going, right, I'm putting a bigger performance again, or obviously on this basic level of enhancement, can we then elevate it again with something else on top of it, type of thing. So patience is a virtue to some degree. Consistency is a big one in terms of obviously applying that across the board. And I think I'd probably say for the majority of people who are intrigued about drug use, especially I'd say the masters division, not just to simply staple it on there in terms of TRT use, I think, again, there are so many staples out there which you can be doing to improve your natural testosterone levels to begin with. And from there, considering the enhancement, you have to consider with a lot of these clinics that are advertising to you that there's an argument to say that they're going to say, oh, you have low testosterone.
The threshold at which they'll consider low testosterone is much higher than the NHS.
And that's because they want to supply you with something.
I think one of the ideas I like to push back on is this idea that TRT in itself is performance enhancing. TRT should not be performance enhancing. It should just give you the level of performance that you should have had if your testosterone level was normal. If you're taking so much TRT that your testosterone is above the normal natural range, it's no longer TRT, it's just being on cycle. And that's fine, but it's not the same thing.
No, exactly. It's hormone replacement therapy, however you want to call it, basically, in terms of that. And I think back to the initial question, do I condone clients using it or starting it? No, not at all. Obviously, they are an adult at the end of the day. I think the purpose of this platform is to give them awareness, a bit of education on it, so people aren't doing stupid stuff. It's basically the same as a safe sex talk. What you decide to do with it afterwards is completely down to you.
But if you're competing, you need to be aware that there are people who will eat bricks to beat you. And that doesn't mean that you should be willing to eat bricks too. But there are people who will do whatever it takes.
Never settle.
I think with the bodybuilding and powerlifting, maybe powerlifting a little bit less, but there is a perception that you can drug yourself to success. You just can't do it. You can't do it in bodybuilding or powerlifting. There's just a belief that you can. But in jiu-jitsu, you really can't. It's just a tool that will allow you to recover more. Most of the guys I speak to that go on mild cycles will just say things like, I used to be only able to manage 4 or 5 sessions a week. I can train 6 days a week now. Or I was training 6 days a week, but now I can do double sessions on 3 of those days. That's the thing that you see more than anything.
Funny thing about that situation is that most of the time when people start TRT And I go, how's the recovery type of thing? It's not even the first thought in the back of their mind all of a sudden. And I'm like, well, that was the purpose of you doing this in the first place, because your recovery was in the bin, basically. So it's like, what's the purpose of this? Was there another agenda behind it, type of thing? The other thing to consider is that the sport that we do in grappling is just a hobby, right? You wouldn't see a guy in his five-a-side football team trying to think, how can I improve my cardio, do you know what I mean, on a Sunday night?
I think they would now. I think everybody is taking their hobby way more seriously than they ever used to. Yeah, I think that's why you've got people that 10 years ago, people in our situation would join jiu-jitsu and we would go to one class a week. People join up and it's now their whole personality. I've got friends that are into mountain biking. I know people that are taking performance-enhancing drugs for mountain biking. I think across the board, guys in their 30s have got a bit of disposable cash, guys in their 40s, they are throwing everything they can at the wall. I don't know why. I think a big part of it is social media.
Acceptance.
I think before social media, you could have a hobby and be wildly mediocre at it and just enjoy it, and that was fine and no one cared. But now, you've got to be able to post and look at this new trail I rode, look at this new belt I got, look at this medal I got. Bodyweight. I think social media has fundamentally changed the motivation for us to do the things we do in our leisure time, and has fundamentally affected what we have to achieve in those things to feel fulfilled from them.
That's interesting.
Because every time I see a friend in the real world, have you got a new belt yet? Obviously I haven't, and I don't care. But people expect to see this because they used to like highlight reels of people's lives.
That is interesting.
Or they say you're still doing karate.
Well, that's it. I know the other day I was watching Polaris at a 80th birthday party, and the woman was obviously clearing drinks and stuff, so I had my phone propped up on the glass, and she's like, oh, you finished your drink? Like, how was the wrestling? Yeah. Bear in mind, most of them were leg lockers that were doing this stuff in the first place. Lucas Can architectures and skill that type of stuff, so there was no wrestling involved in this.
I'm a wrestler now.
Yeah? You're ready to show it?
Yeah.
That's much better. I want to circle back on one thing. You said, like, pushing drugs into a higher level. I always love talking about ultras because it's like a weird conundrum in itself type of thing. And I'm not talking about bringing it down to super heavy, obviously the biggest fish in the pond. Looking at some of the big names out there that we discussed in terms of their gear usage being obscene, right? Do you think you could do that with an ultra? If they were, let's say you had a 6'4" guy type of thing, so he belonged there. Do you think you could gear someone up to the ultras to actually own it type of thing?
I mean, there's a few things to consider here. First of all, drugs really should be dosed on a milligram per kilogram basis. Yeah, they never are because it's complicated. But so a guy who's 6'4" and 140 kilos should be taking twice as much gear as someone who's 70 kilos. Okay, it doesn't apply to all drugs. Things that activate on your central nervous system or your brain are a little bit different because that should be roughly the same size. I think it comes down to athletic ability. If you've got like a 120 kilo guy who is inherently quite athletic, who has the time to put in to train full time to do their conditioning, could you fill them full of drugs and make them a dramatically better athlete than they would be without? Yeah, I think you could. But I think it depends on them having that innate level of athletic ability, because without that, they're going to become slow and muscle bound and heavy and whatever.
So if we were to hypothetically find us a Eastern European scapulator strongman, basically, he was already 6'4", 120 kgs, probably one of the best shape, but was just strong as fuck, and we kept him in a cave in Dagestan until he got his purple belt type of thing.
He'd probably be pretty good. Shane Flowers has been into jiu-jitsu for 6 months now. Yeah, I think he's like 9th strongest man in the world.
Yeah, like I said, the ultra conundrum is interesting, I think, just because all of a sudden, yes, there's technical ability, yes, there's an element of, I wouldn't say flexibility in there. I don't obviously how much that would impact in terms of muscle mass and stuff like that, but something to consider.
There is a lot more of just two guys pushing into each other like ones until someone gets top position and then Americana with them. That happens a lot more with the ultras than it does anywhere else.
Yeah, you obviously have some exceptions of rules, obviously, like good old big boy Mark McQueen's playing a bit more legs nowadays type of thing, but again, it's like Mark's still not the biggest person.
No, Mark's very small for an ultra.
But again, it's come from that powerlifting background, and it's like, okay, well, how much drugs could you put through Mark and then see how much more further would it be a benefit?
Yeah, I think it entirely comes down to how well they can maintain that gas tank. Yeah, a bigger muscle burns through oxygen quicker.
Yep.
Mark McQueen's very impressive.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to that whole car analogy. You can have a nice car out on the road, but then put it on a racetrack, you're going to have to adjust it, basically, for it to be really optimal.
unless you get a McLaren.
Do we condone it? I wouldn't say I condone it. I'd rather people be aware and that they are doing the appropriate things to keep themselves safe. At the end of the day, you're all adults, so it's your decision.
Buy support max. Get your blood work done as strong. Look, it's a part of the sport. It's happening. Unless something changes at the fundamental level, it's not going to go away. If you want to be competitive, you're probably going to have to play that game. If you're not that bothered about being competitive, then don't play that game.
Yeah, that's basically it. And then also the blood work at Sean's now mobile, so you can order your kits to your home and sent it back in.
As long as you've got someone to suck your blood out.